Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
So in the category of Philadelphia lore that nobody tells you when you move here, I learned this week that the crack in the Liberty Bell is like a mistake in the crafting of the Liberty Bell. Rabbi Witkowski taught me that when the bell was initially rang to announce Philadelphia's independence, the bell wasn't cracked, and the famous crack appeared later during a test ring in the 19th century, and when some research was done on this, apparently the bell was flawed from its original casting. It was made with some sort of brittle metal that couldn't withhold the stress of its own resistance. It seems like some people know this, and some people are like, oh, I've lived in Philadelphia for 20 years, and I didn't know this either. So what began as a minor imperfection eventually developed into this iconic crack that we recognize today. And so I was reflecting on this accidental or purposeful, mistaken crack as I was thinking about Moshe shattering the tablets of the Ten Commandments. And the question I had was, were the Ten Commandments, which is a symbol of the covenant between God and the Jewish people, initially flawed from the beginning, or did it become flawed? Were the Israelites going to create something like the golden calf no matter what? Or did something happen that created the flaw? So this shattering moment of Moshe coming down the mountain with the Ten Commandments, it's not just this physical breaking of an object, but it's the fracturing of a covenantal relationship and the collapse of what had been so carefully built. And when we think of the Liberty Bell, it's maybe this symbol of this democracy that had been so carefully built, and then all of a sudden, it's this crack, this flaw. And again, we can ask this question, was the flaw already there, or did it come about? And we can ask the same question in both instances. Moshe is standing on the mountain with the cracked tablets, and with the Liberty Bell, which is what now? What do we do? So what did Moshe do? He went back and he went back up the mountain. He rewrote a second set of 10 commandments, and he restored the covenantal relationship between God and the Israelites and the sacredness of the commandments. But what's interesting is that the covenantal relationship didn't end just in that moment. Moshe came back down the mountain. He didn't see the golden calf, and he successfully delivered the commandments to the Israelite people. But this covenant still exists today, right? Between us, Jews, and God, the covenant is constantly renewed. It experiences moments of destabilization. It did in the first set of the Ten Commandments, and still today, this covenant experienced destabilization. And in another episode of this week's Parsha, we're given a paradigmatic example of how we can renew the covenant every week. So in this week's Parsha, Ki Tisa, amid the narrative of the golden calf and the shattered tablets, we find a really obvious and but yet surprising commandment, which are the commandments of Shabbat. Why are these two juxtaposed against each other? This breaking of the covenant and then this renewal of the covenant that comes to us every week. So the broken tablets represented a fractured covenant that needed restoration. And Shabbat actually offers us this opportunity for continued renewal of our covenant with God. When everything seems broken, Shabbat stands in our way as a consistent invitation to a moment or 25 hours of wholeness. Why would the Torah place the commandment here at this moment of perhaps the greatest communal failure? Perhaps because Shabbat is the very antidote to the breakdown that we witness in the shattering of the tablets and the golden calf. The Parsha says, "You should keep my Shabbat, for this is a sign between me and you, between God and the Israelites throughout all of the ages. You shall keep Shabbat, observing it throughout the ages as a covenant for all time. It shall be a sign of all time between me and the people of Israel. So 2 times we hear within 5 verses that Shabbat is a sign or an oath, and a brit olam, or an eternal covenant. These are also the terms that describe the relationship that was fractured when Moshe shattered the tablets. The placement of these verses isn't accidental. They appear right before Moshe descends the mountain and witnesses the golden calf. Parsha commentator Aviva Zorenberg offers insight into the juxtaposition of this shattering and sanctification. While the golden calf represents what Zorenberg describes as a hypnotic or fixed quality that makes alternative visions of reality unimaginable, Shabbat, and we'll soon learn by extension, Kiddush, represents an invitation to a different kind of reality altogether. The simple act of Kiddush stands in stark contrast to the unconflicted ecstasy of the people dancing around the golden calf. Where the golden calf demanded elaborate, all-consuming worship, Kiddush requires only our presence and the recognition of the sacred within the ordinary. So you might be asking, Rabbi, why do you just bring up Kiddush when you just read me the laws of Shabbat? So there's a story in our Talmud, in Tractate Psachim, that uses the very verses of our Parsha to command us to recite Kiddush. The story goes like this. Rav Ashi once visited the community of Mechoza. There he asked to recite what they called Kiddush Rabbah, the great Kiddush, the blessing that sanctifies Shabbat over wine. Expecting something elaborate and complex for what was called the Kiddush Rabbah, Rav Ashi was momentarily puzzled. Reasoning that all blessings over wine begin with the same words, he simply recited, Borei Pri Hagafen, thank you, God, the one who creates the fruits of the vine. So Rav Ashi watched an elder bend over his cup and drink after this blessing, and Rav Ashi immediately understood. This term, Kiddush Rabbah, or the Great Kiddush, wasn't great because of its complexity, but because of its fundamental power to transform ordinary time into sacred acts through the simplest act, reciting Kiddush. And the Talmud then uses this proof text from Ecclesiastes. The wise person has eyes in their head, meaning wisdom lies in recognizing the extraordinary within the ordinary. So what connects these 2 moments, which is Moshe shattering the tablets and then the simple act of Kiddush, is that both reveal essential truths about our relationship with the sacred. In moments of fracture, when covenant seems beyond repair, the path forward isn't necessarily through grand gestures of atonement, but through returning to the fundamental acts of sanctification. Not a golden idol that demands ecstatic worship, but a cup of wine that invites blessing and mindful presence. It's become our norm to cling to the brokenness of the shattered tablets or the audacity of the golden calf, to let ourselves be bogged down by the stress and chaos and perhaps trauma that shattering moments bring to our lives. But what the Talmud, in connection with these laws of Shabbat that come at this sort of weird moment of Ki Tisa, teaches us that there is a way to let go of our brokenness, even just if we recite Kiddush 1 time on Friday night or a few times on Friday night, Saturday afternoon, and Saturday night. We sanctify our time, we mark our moments with Kiddush on Shabbat. So this Shabbat, as we say Kiddush together in just a few moments, let us recognize this simple act for what it truly is. It's not just a ritual. It's our weekly opportunity to release our brokenness and to renew our covenant through sacred power of ordinary presence. Shabbat Shalom.